A report by the Mail and Guardian says that government is pushing for the expulsion of the U.S. ambassador to South Africa, Reuben Brigety. It comes after he said that he could bet his life that South Africa had supplied weapons to Russia loaded onto the Lady R vessel which docked in Simonstown in December. Now, reports suggest that a panel has found that no weapons were loaded onto that vessel. For more on this, we're joined by the associate editor at the Daily Maverick, Brooks Spector. Brooks, a very good evening to you, and welcome to the program. So, it appeared for a while that the breakdown in the relationship between Ambassador Brigety and Pretoria had been mended, or at least that a line had been drawn under it. Are you surprised to hear then that there is now this push for his expulsion?
Well, it's not so much that I'm surprised. I guess I thought I probably figured it was inevitable that some people within the South African government or within the governing party, or others for that matter, might well be advocating the expulsion of Ambassador Brigety. But that's it's a pretty significant step to order an ambassador to leave. Although it is also true that any ambassador at the country X from country Y is there really ultimately at the willingness of the host country to receive him or her. The problem for Ambassador Brigety, of course, now is that it's not clear, at least not to me yet, how much Washington and the State Department and the White House feel that they need to support him such that they don't, say, recall him or allow South African arguments to prevail, partly because his connections, his relationship with the South African government and its various departments and agencies has pretty well been burnt through as a result of all this. And ambassadors and their staffs obviously and ultimately have to have the ability to talk to meet with, to interact with, to even try to convince or persuade the host government on issues. Circumstances have obviously moved to the point where he would not be easily welcomed into many government offices at this point.
So is his departure, whichever way it's phrased, by Washington when and should it happen, is it inevitable?
I don't know whether it's inevitable because, nothing is inevitable, as they say, besides death and taxes. It's always possible that some of this is a little bit of kabuki, some feinting in terms of, we're going to need an apology or something like that. But remember, too, that the report on the Lady R, none of it's been made public. There have been some leaks saying that, as I read it, that yes, they received weapons that had been ordered previously, and it was then loaded with food bound for Russia. Now, I'm scratching my head a little bit trying to figure out why in the world they loaded food onto it in a naval base, but, that's a question. But until such time as it is publicly explained what was found, we're still in a bit of a black box on this one. We don't really know how they would frame an understanding between the ambassador and the South African government. It's going to be very ticklish. One thing that might happen is he may be called back to Washington for some temporary duty, some assignment until things cool down and blow over, if that were possible, unless, of course, the people in the South African government or the governing party decide that they really, really want to see him leave. But remember, too, something like this, pushing right to the brink like this, has consequences down the road. What will be the reaction, for example, in the United States Congress when this happens, given the fact that there is already some resistance to keeping South Africa as a nation eligible for AGOA tariff freedom, exporting products to the United States? It's no good the South African government saying they want an early renewal of AGOA. That's not going to happen. That's not their job. It isn't the president's job. It's Congress, and Congress is a little bit already has a certain testiness about South Africa and its relationship with Russia.
So if the ambassador was expelled or recalled by Washington, do you think that would work against South Africa in the negotiations around the AGOA arrangement?
Well, it's not going to help it. Let's put it that way. It's going to be, to some people, not obviously everybody, but to some people, it's going to be proof that American and South African views on the Russian invasion of Ukraine, just to name one thing, are not aligned, and there is no reason to see them getting better aligned, and that is certainly not going to be helpful. Eligibility for AGOA isn't actually a negotiation because it's not a treaty. It's U.S. law, and it allows African nations to export their products duty-free, but it's not a negotiation in the normal sense of the word because it isn't two parties trying to decide what they're going to agree to do something on.
And, Brooks, did Ambassador Brigety go about this the right way? I mean, when he called that extraordinary briefing, a lot of people did say at the time that in any other country, for example, if a South African ambassador had gone on television in the United States and made similar remarks, that they would have had to leave, simply because that wasn't the most diplomatic way to handle the situation. So did he cause a mess ultimately, and could he have done it better?
The short answer to your question is in that last phrase. Could it have been done better? Yes, it could have been. The usual version of this would have been to make his remonstrances to the South African government that the following things are not good for bilateral relations, et cetera, rather than doing what he did at the way in which he did it. But remember, too, there have been previous government visitors from the U.S. telling South Africa that in their view, the alignment with Russia was getting far too close or getting into a problematic zone, shall we say. And I guess, since I haven't talked to him, I guess that he just took what amounted to a linguistic shortcut and blurted this out. But blurting things out has consequences too. And, now we're seeing all the different ripples and repercussions that are flowing from it. The key here has to be, though, for the two governments to find ways to minimize the difference rather than to continue to exploit it and make it worse than it already is, because there are obviously a fair number of things that the two countries see eye to eye on and interests where they coincide. And it does nobody any good to have what amounts to a shouting war over what was inside the hold of the Lady R when it departed Simonstown. That's hardly the basis for international understanding.
Brooks Spector, good to speak to you, Associate Editor for the Daily Maverick. Thank you for your time.